mailed to you, but you get the complete QST archive going back to, I don't know, it seems like it goes back to before Christ. It goes way back.
It goes all the way back to the very beginning of the first issue of QST, which is December 1914. You log onto our website as a member, and you can go back and look at any periodic. There's a periodical search archive index that you can look through. Type in a keyword or an author's name or a call sign or even a year, and you can find the article that you want. And that's very useful.
That is incredible. And then on top of that, there is, I radio engineer. I got another radio engineer sitting over here next to me, Ted, sitting here. I'm Ted, he's Ted.
Hi, Ted.
Go ahead and try it there.
Hello, testing.
That's not
3-4. CQDX, 40 meters.
There he goes.
Now, here's the deal. If you go into radio stations across the country today, it used to be that you would find the NAB Engineering Handbook. Big, thick thing.
You betcha.
Like
I had one.
Two or three thicknesses of a yellow page directory. Okay, now, radio stations across the country, you're more apt to find the ARRL handbook, radio handbook.
Yep, radio
or two
handbook.
or three editions of it on the shelf, more so than you would the NAB broadcast handbook. And that's just a fact.
Because there is so much stuff in that ARRL handbook, from basic electricity to electronics to circuits to some of the most advanced stuff that's out there now. It literally runs sunrise to sunset as far as the theory is concerned, and the theory behind the operation of the circuits as well, too.
Most certainly. And I got to run to my project building booth, but I want to say this also, that members of the ARRL get another free service that they don't even realize, and that's our technical information service. If any member of ours has a technical question, they don't know how to build a dipole, or they want to find out what the value of this resistor is in this amplifier, they can contact the ARRL laboratory, and we can get the answer for them. It could be any radio-related question. We'll find that answer for you, and if we don't know it, we'll look it up and find that problem and solve your problems. If you have radio frequency interference from power lines, we have a guy for that. We have a guy who is a know-it-all on every single topic of radio. His name is Zach Loud, W1VT. Mike Gruber, W1MG, is our RFI expert. Then we have our lab dad, who is Ed Hare, W1RFI. Worried about BPL? Maybe your AT&T U-verse problems? Huh? What? Yeah, that's a big problem these days. So, we're working on behalf of you to help you solve your problems, the ARRL Technical Information Service. And call the main switchboard, and they'll route you into the laboratory, and we'll answer your questions. That's a free membership service that maybe you don't realize you have as a member.
Well, I thank you much.
All right, back to the booth, and thank you, Ted Randall. See you on the radio wave sometime on WBCQ.
Yeah, that's right.
Monticello, Maine, USA.
And we also want you to tell them again the times, because I don't know, when is Marion's Attic on now?
Oh, let me think about that. Marion's Attic. Marion Webster. 5 o'clock on Sundays, 5 p.m. Sunday. I just like those cylinder records that she plays. That's pretty wild.
Last year she stopped by the booth here.
I heard that. In fact,
she may come back again this year. I don't know.
I was on the other side of the room. I was all excited when I heard about it after the fact. But that's too bad. I missed her. I would have liked to
thank you for coming by here. And if you see her at some point, send her over here.
Okay, we'll do.
Let her talk about Edison.
I heard she loads up her walker has an antenna. So if you see an MFJ antenna tuner attached to it, that's her antenna. Little rubber feet insulate the walker from the ground. Makes a good antenna, so I think. All right, Ted, see ya. 7-3.
Yep, 7-3.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. You're listening to a live broadcast. We're coming to you from Dayton, Ohio. And this is the Dayton Hamvention 2011. And we're glad that you've tuned us in here. We're on, actually, Rod Hambry has let us occupy his time today on 93.30, and we want to say thank you so much. And normally, of course, if you're tuned in expecting to hear their programming, they'll be back at their normal times after the Hamvention's over with here. And in the meantime, we hope you enjoy listening to what we're doing here. So I also want to say hello to Ted, who just sat down. And,
Ted Alexander, W8IXY.
And Ted is from I guess I want to say the Cleveland, Ohio area.
I've been a broadcaster in Cleveland for almost half century now.
You're not that far from home here, so.
No, it's about a 3.5-hour drive. This is about my 35th ham venture. First one I was down here, too, was in 1962.
You know what the funniest thing in the world is? We got one of these GPS units. It's a TomTom. And when we get into the area, the voice lady, she talks about, go straight to Toledo. And I sat there and I thought, where is Toledo? Where could that possibly be? And it's just hysterical. I mean, the first time I heard it, I was laughing so hard, I had tears in my eyes. Toledo. Have you ever heard of Toledo?
I think I've heard it pronounced that way, but there are several other Ohio, let alone some other states and other parts around the world, too, with some odd pronunciations. For instance, there's a town in Ohio called Medina, but most people pronounce it Medina. And, in fact, in Minnesota, there's an Edina, but it's spelled Edina, same spelling.
I had an aunt that had something called edema, and they took water pills for that. Oh, well, never mind. I was just trying to,
Well, look at Conneaut, Ohio, spelled Conneaut. People say, what is that, Canute? And then just some spellings that are different. A suburb of Youngstown, Ohio, is spelled Campbell, just like the soup, but it's pronounced camel, like the cigarette. Oh, wait, we can't say cigarettes on the radio anymore, can we? That's it.
I think what it is, they just don't let you to smoke them on the radio.
Okay.
You can't smoke them on the radio. See, if the listeners see you smoking a cigarette on the radio, that you got. Gentleman just sat down here who is an expert on satellites.
Hi, Ted. How are you?
Wow.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm eating the microphone. My name is Keith Baker. I'm KB1SF. I also have a Canadian call, VA3KSF. And like you, I was in broadcasting many years ago, back when I was working my way through college. So, but anyway, I wanted to stop by and say hello and tell people that some of the stuff that we're doing with a group called AMSAT, which is the Radio Amateur Satellite Corporation, a nonprofit organization that builds and launches amateur radio satellites. In fact, we had Colonel Doug Wheelock just over at our booth, the astronaut who was on board the International Space Station, just returned. And wanted to let everyone know we have a satellite actually up there at the moment in the International Space Station that hopefully sometime the end of July is going to be dropped overboard by one of the cosmonauts, and it will be available it has a downlink on FM on 2 meters, and it has something on the order of about 15 different languages, greetings in 15 different languages. And it'll be going on all the way around the world. We also have a transponder on it, so if you're so equipped, you can communicate through it. So this is one of our latest activities. We have 3 more of them in the barn, ready to fly, and with the assistance of NASA, and in this case we're working with Energia, which is the Russian space agency. They're helping us launch this one. They gave us a free lift, if you will, up to the International Space Station. It was launched out of Russia. And hopefully NASA will be assisting us in the future. In fact, NASA's helped us with this one to get it to work all the paperwork and get all of that sort of stuff done. So lots of exciting things going on in the amateur satellite world at the moment.
A person that has an interest in getting into satellite communications, experimenting with it.
Absolutely.
Where do they start?
Well, probably the best place to start, if you're internet equipped, is to go to our website, which is www.amsat.org. And there's all kinds of information there. There's links to various and sundry getting started kinds of things. I've been doing a getting started satellite column in Monitoring Times magazine as of late, and also in our journal to help people get started. But there's a lot of information available right off our website. There's lots and lots of links there for people to get started, because it's kind of a mysterious thing. You say, well, I communicate through a satellite. Wow, I didn't know I can do that. But in reality, with nothing more than a handheld and a small antenna that you can hold in your hand.
Well, it makes me wonder how many people can actually fathom the fact that as a hobby, you can work through a satellite.
Absolutely.
And as you were talking about the astronauts
That's
earlier,
right.
you can talk directly to the space shuttle.
Correct, and it's not only do the it's called amateur radio on the International Space Station. It's called ARIS. Not only do they communicate by way of amateur radio to school children, which absolutely changes lives. It's a life changer for a youngster to talk directly to a satellite, to an astronaut in orbit. But you can do the same thing.
You talk about an experience that got to me. The very first ham convention that I was at here in Dayton was in 1962, and they had Oscar,
yes.
the orbital
Yes.
satellite
Yes.
carrying amateur radio.
Yes.
We passed that thing around. We looked at it.
Yeah.
We said, "My goodness, what other hobby in the world can you not only have a satellite launched but talk through it?"
That's right. In fact, Oscar 1, which was the very first satellite that went into orbit, was literally built in people's garages and basements. And it was launched, if you can believe this, they launched it using a thermally balanced, very, very high-tech spring, which came out of Sears and Roebuck. $1.19.
I seem to remember that. It's a Boeing, and
Yeah,
there it
that's
is.
all
It's
it was.
in orbit.
In
Amazing.
fact, Oscar 1, which is the amateur satellite, Oscar 1 was the very first satellite to be carried as a secondary payload on a rocket. The very first. I mean, Air Force, of course, at that time, it was the Air Force was the only game in town that was launching satellites. But yes, the amateur satellite community has been on the cutting edge of satellite development, and we've flown all kinds of firsts. We flew the first CMOS devices in space.
Well, amateur radio has been involved with satellites since there's been satellites.
Pretty much. 1961 was the first one.
I'm thinking back to Sputnik in 1957. There was
right.
a high school radio club that I was proud to be part of. I didn't come on to that year, but at St. Joseph High School in Cleveland, Ohio, they actually invented a thing called an orbitometer.
Yes.
They would take they were on 20 megahertz. They would take the 20-meter beam, they would point it over to the horizon. They'd time the horizon on it, the orbit time, and they say within 30 seconds or so we'll acquire the signal.
Up it pops.
And there it was.
Yeah.
And that was, amateur radio at some of its finest. And these were 15-year-old young guys.
Absolutely. Well, one of the reasons that the Russians put the downlink beacon at 20 megahertz was that it was very close to an amateur radio band. And they knew that hams were able to copy that thing. That's why they put it there.
And they did. And if I don't know how many people remember CQ magazine. They actually had a oscilloscope trace as the cover shot of that magazine. That was made at that high school radio club.
In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the ARRL was given the backup for Oscar 1, the backup satellite, and the folks there in the lab, as I understand it, have been refurbishing it, and they've actually got it back on the air. Mm-hmm. And I think that was supposed to be here at the Hamvention. So,
and that was the old analog days here.
Absolutely.
And now look at the advanced communications that we can do through the satellites that you do with an antenna. Almost handheld.
Handheld. In fact, I have done that in my backyard with a handheld and a handheld antenna. Have communicated not only to the International Space Station, well, I've also talked to the Mir Space Station before it came in, but also with satellites 500 and 600 miles up in orbit. So it's just this hobby is just amazing.
It's a communications hobby, but so many facets.
So many facets to it.
From literally antenna to antenna, your signal around the world, out into space, and just the listening aspect of it. I mean, if you've got the antennas out there for, say, like the AMSATs and stuff, if you point your antenna at the planet Jupiter, you can hear radio emissions from Jupiter. You can hear it from the sun.
Yeah. Well, in fact, there's a group of AMSAT folks in Germany that I was working with when we were building the Phase 3D satellite, which you may remember. They did the first bounce of a signal off of Venus. And actually, they got a signal back. Mm-hmm. They bounced it off of Venus. So these hams, we're just doing all kinds of fun
What's
things.
What's coming up next for us?
As far as our satellite is concerned, we're waiting to have this ARISat, which is on board the International Space Station, tossed overboard, hopefully sometime in July. And we're also working on a very small set of satellites. We call them CubeSats. They're about 4 or 5 inches on a side.
Are you serious? They look like a Rubik's Cube size
They're
device?
basically, they're a little bit bigger than a Rubik's Cube. They're about 5-6 inches on a side, weigh about 5 pounds, and you can launch multiple of these things out of a little, for lack of a better term, a gun. But it's a little box with a little